We start off with an extraordinary meeting. I do have some announcements, but they will wait until our ordinary meeting, which will start at the conclusion of this. Depending on the length of this meeting, we may have a short break before we move on to the ordinary meeting, and I think that we will anyway, to give the questioners a chance to come down from upstairs and down here. So, have we got any apologies?
Councillor Williams.
Right. Right, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Oh, no. Right, so this is for Derby's electoral cycle. So, yeah, sorry, did you say something?
No, I think
Sorry, no, I'm hearing things. We have before us a report of the Director of Governance in her capacity as the Council's electoral registration officer. The report follows a decision by Council towards the end of the last municipal year that we consult the public on the proposal to move to 4 yearly elections. That consultation has now taken place, and the report contains details of that and other correspondence the Council has received. Members have been advised by email of one error in the report. At paragraph 2.3, it is stated that if members pass the resolution to change our electoral cycle, the matter cannot be brought back for another 4 years. As I believe you are all aware, that should state 5 years. The draft motion before members is at paragraph 2.2. I understand Councillor Banwaite will move the motion as printed. Councillor Banwaite, will you address Council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, considerable thought has gone into putting this motion forward. We have debated it on numerous occasions. It's been a big talking point in this city for considerable time now. I have to say I'm not particularly optimistic. There are rumours that the Conservatives have whipped their members not to support the electoral change. So it does look like tonight's is just going to be going through the motions. On the one hand, I wouldn't want to waste members' time, members of the public and officers' time in going through the motions and stating the arguments yet again. It is unfortunate that it will transpire that, it is disappointing that Alan Graves couldn't make tonight, but I believe he's stuck in London. I did speak to him about 3 o'clock. He didn't say to me he was in London at the time, so I'm a bit surprised about that. We spoke about the electoral cycle, because he did put in the paper that he was concerned about the date, whereas UKIP would support it. He was concerned about the date. But I am disappointed that Alan Graves didn't tell me. I'm assuming he was in London at 3 o'clock. But he did not tell me he was in London at 3 o'clock, so he's not here today. Well, look, Madam Mayor, I think at the crux of everything that is bad about politics in this city and what holds this city back is the electoral cycle, Madam Mayor. It disables the ability of elected members to think long-term and think strategically. And I think it brings out the worst in local politics because, when elected members look at making decisions, the first thing they think about, and, we do all do it, let's be honest, is when you're faced with an issue, you discuss it, you debate it, you ask for options to come forward from officers, our external partners out there, and then the next thing you think about is what will be the impact on the local elections? And often the local elections are only a few months away. So it is something that does drive our influence. We are politicians, we nothing to be not proud of, and we have to think about elections, but that should not be the first or the second or even the third thing on our mind. We should not let it influence our ability to come up with the right solutions in taking our great city forward. But the reality is it has become a real issue. Now more than ever, when we are dealing with some very complex problems, austerity is a big impact on services. Today I hear, and we're still waiting on a full briefing, the Chancellor has not done public services any favour. We're talking about billions of pounds of additional cuts in public services. No doubt council services will feel yet again the brunt of that. Local government has been hit the hardest. It's going to be hit again. I've got a letter on my desk from having signed up to the 4-year financial settlement along with other councils as per the Local Government Association's advice. An ominous line in the letter saying that actually it's the first step towards councils being self-reliant. In other words, government have actually made no secret, to be fair. The previous Chancellor talked about councils doing more for themselves. The reality are we are looking at a future where we will get very little support from local central government. So these are the kind of issues and challenges that are facing councils up and down the country. The ability to think strategically and long term, over 4 years, it will transform the way politics is done in our city. Because suddenly you're freed up with the pressure of going to the polls, the pressure of losing your seat. You can suddenly start to have a proper dialogue with the city, with our external partners. And not surprisingly, if you look at the external partners that are supporting this, it's pretty incredible. For the party of big business, they're going to slap in the face of big business tonight. They're going to slap in the face of our local transport providers, Arriva and Trent, two private companies, commercial companies. I don't know their politics, but they are supporting the electoral cycle change. Derby County Football Club. And again, you can speculate about Mel Morris's political loyalties. He's an entrepreneur, a businessman, he courts all sorts of politicians. Well, Derby County is supporting the electoral cycle change. The Cricket Club have written a letter to support the electoral cycle change, and the comments are well reported and documented in the Derby Telegraph. D2N2, that receives receives central government funding on regeneration projects, that works collaboratively across D2N2 area, that's Derby, Derbyshire, Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, in the East Midlands region. They are supporting. Peter Richardson, in fact, is quoted again in the Derby Telegraph. The Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce have not been big Labour supporters. Well, the Chamber of Commerce know the value of a 4-year term because they see the difference between working with councils on a 4-year term and they see the issues and challenges facing Derby. The university, the college, Bowman and Kirtland, these are the big businesses which the Conservative Party pride themselves on listening to, that they're about to slap in the face tonight. They've all come out wanting to support this change in the electoral cycle. So, ladies and gentlemen, comrades, fellow councillors, it gives the city political stability. And let's deal with this issue about it's all about securing and safeguarding a particular political party's future. I've made it clear that this is not about party politics. In fact, I remember when the Conservatives took control of this council, Harvey Jennings became leader, the former Spondon councillor, and I phoned Harvey Jennings, and I've always been a big supporter of the electoral cycle change. And I said to Harvey at the time, I said, look, you know, we've got to change the electoral cycle. You know, we're going to be out of power potentially for a considerable time. I will actually help you safeguard your position for the next 4 years. You know, I was actually being an advocate for the Conservative administration at the time, to the horror of my, you know, I'm sure they'll have something to say about that. But that's how strongly I felt. Because you know what? When you have a party running this council on a 4-year term, I don't think that will make that much difference between the politics. Because it will compel the party in power to think strategically and long term without the pressure having to worry about losing a seat at the next elections. It will compel whoever's in opposition to think differently, to campaign differently. And it compels them to sit round the table and to work strategically with the administration on the big challenges. And that's the major advantage, I think, in changing to a 4-year term. And, I mean, I once used this example. I remember somebody said you can't compare the two, but I stand by the comparison I made to a Labour Party person at the time, several years ago, nobody in this room, that, can you imagine putting Parliament on a 1-year term? The chaos that would cause the country. And somebody said to me, well, you can't compare the two. Well, why not? You know, if this was an organisation, a business, we're a government in itself. The budget of the council is comparable to the budget of some countries. You know, we are local government. We deliver complex services. We deliver services that benefit the most disadvantaged in our communities. Very vulnerable people, looked after children. We've got children in care homes. We've got elderly people that rely upon our services, our social services. So nobody can tell us that actually local government doesn't play a substantial part in our city. And we know that because every time we make a decision, the media are all over it. It's the end of the world when Christmas lights get switched off or whatever it is, you know. Rightly so in some cases, the question is posed at the council. So the public clearly recognise that the council is at the forefront of leading our city. So, but give us, for God's sake, the ability, the means to do it. And giving us a one-year electoral cycle to take forward this city is hugely disabling. It holds us back all the time. And an example, actually, if you saw the Telegraph today, was quite an interesting one about our desire as a city to have a new pool. It's gone on record now that Chris Williamson, love him or loathe him, when he was leader of the council in 2008, had ambitions to replace Moorways. What happened? We lost control of the council. The Liberals came in and they scuppered the plans. They came up with their own plans to build a pool with slides, or I can't remember what the other fancy ideas were. Now, no doubt they would have had some merit, no problem. But the reality is those plans were then shelved by the incoming Conservative administration. Now, on a pool, we can all agree that the city needs a pool. But again, if you look at the space of those years, one administration unpicks the ambitions of another administration, and then another administration. There are all sorts of examples of where we've looked at real issues in the city, and our party politics has often come into play. Madam Mayor, there are other important reasons. The other reason I would say, Madam Mayor, is saving taxpayers' money. Every time we go to the polls, it costs money. Finance directors, advisors, by bringing in this change, we potentially would look to save £100,000 net a year. And part of this administration's commitment, Madam Mayor, if we were to make the electoral cycle change, the Labour administration commits, if we were to make that change, any savings achieved would be divided equally to each ward. Now, whether we do it on a ward-by basis, or whether we do it on a ward-by basis, Madam Mayor, or whether we do it on an individual councillor's basis, that's one of the things we would certainly look to do, because there's a concept of community budgeting, and there's a new concept where you can actually allocate the funding to individual councillors. But any savings made will be put directly back into local communities. And I think the other point I want to address is the date that we're proposing. The date we're proposing, Madam Mayor, is 2020. And there's several reasons for that. One is, by aligning it with the Police Crime Commissioner elections, it tackles that issue about voter apathy. We know from the statistics, you know, the glaring statistics that anybody can get access to, the turnouts when you have an election on thirds, it always is lower compared to all-out elections. We also know, in Derby's experience, that when you group elections together, you tend to get a bigger turnout. We know that from the period when the general election has been aligned with the local elections. We also know the turnout's much bigger after a fallow year as well, because people haven't voted in that period. Madam Mayor, we also know that the turnout for the Police Crime Commissioner hasn't been all that great. I'm pleased to say we've got the Police Crime Commissioner here, and he's here on merit. But the reality is, many of us represent wards and communities where the electoral turnouts aren't that great. That is not good for democracy, surely. So by aligning it with the Police Crime Commissioner, we will get the benefit of being able to say to the people that when you go out after every 4 years to put your X in that box, to take part in one of the most finest institutions, the most finest reasons you can give any citizen in a Western democracy to come out of their home and to switch EastEnders off maybe for a couple of hours and watch it on pre-record, is to decide who's going to run your city and who's going to run your police. I can't imagine that nobody wants to come out every 4 years to decide and make those two big decisions. Of course, Madam Mayor, we also potentially get the benefit for that 1 year that if this current government, this parliament, goes through its full parliamentary term, that we'd have the benefit that the general election potentially will be on that same year. So what a boost that would give democracy in our city. That people on that one day will get the chance to decide who's going to run their city, their police, and their country. What a powerful, powerful example of democracy. What a powerful reason to get people to come out and to vote. So the other reason, Madam Mayor, I just want to deal with, or why 2020, clearly we are asking parties, political parties in the city that are used to voting on thirds, to change the way they've gone about campaigning, to change their structures, and to deal with that big issue which faces all parties, certainly Labour, the Conservatives, I wouldn't say particularly a big issue for UKIP given their size at the moment, is the fact that we have to potentially fill 51 positions. We've got to find 51 people that want to stand. And the Conservatives have gone on record and saying that actually that's their main issue. That's why they wouldn't support it. That's what Philip Hickson used to say when he was former leader. You know, well, to be frank with you, that's not an issue for the city. That's not an issue for the public. That's an internal issue. You know, we, as a Labour Party, have a big ambition to get more women into politics. And we often grapple with that reason. We don't think we get enough, and we have an ambition to get more in. But that's our issue. You know, we will work to find ways forward. But the benefit of 2020 is to give the parties plenty of time to change the way they do things, to think long term, to go on a recruitment drive, to identify and find people. And actually, I think you'll suddenly find people more encouraged and inspired to want to go into local politics because they are being asked to get involved in place shaping in a way they never had to before, in the way we don't as parties. Because suddenly, you've got to come up with a programme over 4 years. You know, at the moment, how ridiculous in these times of austerity does it look when you go to the electorate and you say, our manifesto, if you elect us, we're going to do this next year. And by the way, we're then going to come up with another manifesto for the following year, and then the following year. With what? The Conservatives talked about building a fancy pool. Well, with what? Financing. You know, the financing, as this government's absolutely said, and what the autumn statement talks about, is going to dwindle. So the need to think long term, now more than ever, is absolutely the right way forward. Madam Mayor, I did say that we probably are going through the motions now, because it is disappointing that I think we're going to find tonight, you know, and again, I've got good reason to be cynical about the UKIP games here, because when Alan Graves, I speak to him at 3 o'clock and never tells me, doesn't give me any indication that he's in London or he's not going to be here, has said publicly he's going to support the electoral cycle change, is not here today. I don't know what's going on there. The Conservatives have said they've whipped their members, and I suspect there's some politics there. I suspect what you'll find in the Conservative Party, a big difference is, at one time, clearly when Philip Hickson was leader, it wasn't finally balanced. I think you've got in the Conservative ranks a split. You've got a leader that doesn't want to change the electoral cycle and finds himself in a situation that is half his members, or just under half his members, clearly want the change. And the only way to keep him in line is by whipping them, and he's done that. That's sad. That really, really is sad. Can I just say this now to you, Matthew? You obsess about wanting this seat, mate. You can have it. It's here. You can take it over there if you want, mate. You've got and you've got a lot of supporters up here. It's never whoever's sat here, mate, it's not an easy job. And it's going to get harder and harder and harder and harder. And the reality is, okay, all right, the reality is, we all will become one day private citizens, okay? For whatever reason, we just want the best for our city. And do you know what? If you're sat here one day, I will work with you, whether it's in opposition or as a private citizen, to work with you collaboratively in the best interest of the city, to give you an opportunity to come up with a long-term mandate. And do you know what? There's plenty of people out there that will work with you to come up with that plan. It's a far better way of doing politics in our city. It takes everything bad that is bad about local politics in our city. So, Madam Mayor, I think this is going to be a very short meeting. I think we've got it going on to 7 o'clock. I think this isn't going to get through, Madam Mayor. No doubt there'll be a few more speakers that want to come up. No doubt Matthew Holmes will want to come up and explain why he's not going to support this. But, you know, if I'm wrong, you know, I can be wrong. I've been wrong the time before. I mean, if he is serious about giving his members a free vote, you know, I think that just such would be an honourable and gallant thing to do, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Banwaite. Do we have a seconder for the motion?
You don't need one because it's a report. You don't need one because it's a report.
Okay.
It's the
Oh,
report,
no,
so it's
David
taken
told me
off.
I did. Yeah. No? Okay. Right, then we move to debate then. So, Councillor Holmes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Conservative group has considered this issue very carefully for some time and has settled on a majority view. The group's position is based on consideration of the arguments, the positives and the negatives of both electoral models available to this council, and by seeking briefings with senior officers and listening to the views of the public. We feel at this time the council electoral cycle should remain as thirds. And there are a number of reasons why we're taking this stance. We don't accept that the suggested financial savings of moving to all-out elections will be realised, and are very sceptical of the predictions of savings in the long term. Very early in this debate, through discussions with officers, we drew to the conclusion that both models would result in roughly the same expenditure. In fact, there's actually a possibility in our view that a move to all-outs could cost more. There are a dozen or so local businesses, stakeholders, organisations, many that have either got direct links, work in partnership, or are funded in part by the council, that are clearly in favour of a move to 4 yearly elections, citing more certainty in relation to planning and delivery. And we certainly respect that view. 4 yearly elections may well deliver more certainty in regard to political control, but we don't believe it will deliver stability within Derby City Council, which has a long and difficult path ahead of it to re-establish itself as a viable local authority that has the adequate governance in place. There's also a danger that the known and emerging governance issues within the council will in fact become more acute. And this is about us facing the public regularly to seek a mandate. And I say that in opposition, but it also applies, of course, to the other political parties in this chamber. We need to ensure whoever is in political control of the council is regularly held to account, and that also lends weight to outweigh what is presented as possible benefits of moving to 4 yearly elections at this time, in our view. For example, Labour's so-called brown bin tax and the revenue-generating CCTV enforcement are just two examples. Now, I'm not here to argue the pros or cons of those two particular policies, but what I will say is, to my knowledge, neither appeared in any manifesto leading into the respective elections. The Conservatives have absolutely no faith in the opposition, not to use 4 yearly elections to impose policy and schemes without a mandate and against the will of the majority of local people and businesses. And those decisions could be made in the knowledge that the public would have no ability to have their say or force a change of direction that could be damaging to this city. Schemes such as the workplace parking levy, further revenue generation enforcement, along with many other things that I could cite, will be, in my view and my group's view, firmly on the agenda, and there would be almost nothing anyone could do about it. We respect the views of those who feel a move to 4 yearly elections is the right thing to do, but hope that in return they accept our considered reasons to seek the retention of the current model for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Wright.
Do you want me to go and ask him?
Councillor Wright, did you wish to speak? Okay, thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Elections are central to democracy, and I think we'd all agree with that. And clearly, we all support democracy, And here in this country, we have a representative democracy. I seek to represent the people in Littleover. People across here represent the areas that they represent, primarily, but also I'm sure we're all mindful about people across the city and people who come into the city, whether to work or to visit, but who aren't necessarily voters in the city. And of course, there are people who live here who aren't voters because they aren't eligible to vote, because of age, because of nationality, and for other reasons. We have a consultation report results in front of us. Those comments there are observations, there is opinion. But because we are a representative democracy, those are things that we need to be mindful of, but we don't necessarily need to follow blindly. It's up to us to think, as Councillor Holmes has reported, thinking around the issue, considering the points that are there, and looking at the thing in the whole. Part of that is what the business community think. And there was a significant number of people who indicated they were from the business community who responded to that consultation. And the comments that we have got back in terms of letters are exclusively from the business sector in the widest form. And it's right that we listen to those, but we also need to think about where we are and what our society is thinking at the moment. On June the 23rd this year, we had a referendum, and it has been analysed inside out, back to front. And I think one thing it does show is that there are many people in our society who don't feel that they have a voice. And it is up to us to think very hard about how we can give people a better voice. And for me, removing the opportunity to vote on 2 occasions in a 4-year period actually reduces the size of people's voice. They may not choose to exercise it, but they are reducing the opportunity for ordinary voters to say what they think. So I ask people, do we want to give the impression that we want to ignore, we want to sideline what voters' views are? And I don't believe we do. And I think that at this time, particularly at this time, it's something we need to be mindful of. But we need to come back to the business community who clearly feel very strongly, and the leader of the council has expressed that very firmly, he has clearly been listening to them, that all is not good and we need to do change. So, we need to address the problem that the business community have identified. We need to look at how we can have a more consistency of vision, we can have more direction, commonality of direction, greater stability. And I think we need to look at that without disenfranchising our electorate. And I think there's a way to do it. Now, given the number of times I've spoken, you won't be surprised to know, and there'll be people who already know what I'm likely to be saying. And I think that we have, because we now have the freedom to return to a committee system, I think it's something that we should consider doing. I think that it would be easier for us to work together as 4 parties and independents, if we get them, by sitting round the table together rather than having a cabinet and a scrutiny system. And I think it is time that we thought about that, and I think it is something that the business community might be interested in talking to us about as well. When we had committees, and not everybody here has worked in the committee system, I recognise that, but when we had committees, I don't remember the business community concerned year on year about our voting system. We haven't changed the voting system, we have changed our administration within the council. So I think that that is what we need to do. We need to address the concerns of the business community, and we can talk to them about that. And there are members of the business community who will remember how the council works and how councils generally work under a committee system. And I think we also need to recognise that our voters expect to be able to hold us to account 3 years out of 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Ashburner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I personally oppose this motion. There are 3 issues: the consultation, the justification, the consequence. The consultation lasted 8 weeks from 13th of May to 8th of July, and were only 2 weeks between the Euro election on 23rd of June and the close date of the consultation. Given such distractions, no wonder there was such a low response, only 231. This cannot give any reliable evidence of the general views of the citizens of Derby, and is not even worth a thorough check for errors. An indication of the low response rate during this period is also provided by the fact that all the 10 letters supporting the change were dated outside the consultation period. Given that we are so desperate for feedback, I would not suggest disallowing these. It is also worth noting the similarity of these letters, all of which emphasise the importance of stability, while for the comments from individuals, only 18% mentioned stability. It is almost as though individuals and companies were replying to two different questions. No justification has been provided for the changes in the report, so these comments are based on the two main issues raised by the consultation, which are savings and stability. Savings. This allegedly amounts to £387,000 over 4 years, which sounds a lot, but is only £97,000 a year. Or to put it in a way, the savings would enable this council to demolish one block of public toilets every 12 years, based on their improvements at the spot. or to pay for 70% of the additional taxi licensing support proposed later this evening. How much is democracy worth? More than 1/12 of a toilet block? Regarding stability, this coin has two sides. The party in power is able to ignore the views of the electorate for 3.5 years out of 4. The people of Derby can compare the amount of consultation by their political parties in the run-up to elections with the amount they receive in between elections. This famine would last 4 times as long under Labour's proposals. In a democracy, the only way the electorate can control the actions of the party in power is by that power knowing that there will be elections soon, which will hurt them if they ignore the wishes of the public. It is ironic that Labour wishes to reduce their democratic mandate, given that part of its history is based on the Chartist movement, which have had 6 principles, one of which has not been achieved: annual general elections. The consequence. If approved, whichever party is in power will be able to do whatever they want and ignore the wishes of the people. We have seen Labour's vision with cuts to vital services and money spent on works of art instead. If returned to power, they will have the stability to continue to do this for 4 years. Is that what the people of Derby want? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ashburner. Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, where to begin? I was elected with 14% of the registered vote in my ward, and that's a mandate. That's a mandate to stand here. It's a mandate to contribute to the running of this city. Eric Ashburner with a fantastic 20%. Lucy Kerr, 17% of the people of Little Over thought you should be their councillor, and a whopping 22% for you, Matthew, so winning. We have, I'll give you the list. What we do have is an implicit mandate, which is we need to drive this city forward, and we won't do that when people are so disengaged with politics. So what are we looking to change? We're looking to elect 51 councillors. We do that already. We're looking to ask all of them to serve for 4 years. We do that already. Instead, what we're asking to do is actually have one election where they can get rid of all of us. The truth is the last 2 elections we've had, we've lost seats, and then we won no seats on the back of brown bin tax and other decisions and made-up manifestos. But the truth is, nothing's changed. We sit here, we're still in control, and that's not the change you're talking about, this democracy. It's an absolute fallacy. What would all-out elections give us? It would give us stability. It would give us consistency. not just for what goes on in this chamber, but for business, for investment, for the officers who work with us, and, you know, and enact our policy, we would be there for 4 years with a real mandate, a manifesto that we then get judged upon. Not this piecemeal politics year after year. And then there's the more practical element of it. The run-up to an election, PERDA, 3 out of every 4 years, we tool down, we put on rosettes, and we prance around the streets. Is that really what the people of Derby want? Mostly, they're just surprised we're there because they voted last year. And beyond that, it means our manifestos will mean something. It will encourage people to have a costed manifesto, a real manifesto, a vision for the city for 4 years, not the back of a fag packet rubbish that was disgusting that I saw last year from the Tories. It was absolutely rubbish. Promises you knew you didn't have to keep because you weren't going to win the 16 seats required. Instead, let's go to the electorate with an actual vision. Here's what we'll do if you back us. Yeah. And this idea that it's undemocratic, anyone who thinks that electing members to represent them for a set period of time, and then after that period of time, they all up for election again, is in the wrong country. That's how the parliamentary system works. And that doesn't seem to matter. That doesn't seem to be undemocratic. That's perfectly acceptable. The fact that you want a time machine to go back to a committee system, or the fact that UKIP decide that their best policy is to be, you know, not here at all when the vote matters. Racist. Okay. But the truth is we would give the people of Derby an actual adequate way in which they can change the authority and a time in which they can judge us by. So after 4 years of implementing a very difficult manifesto, you go to the ballot box, you say, back us or sack us. But they don't want that. Instead, it's entirely indicative of the limited ambition that some members in this chamber have for this city, to keep us as a second-tier city, to keep us, you know, not like other unitary authorities and actually having drive and ambition, but instead, you know, always playing petty politics, week in, week out. Do you know what? They're not listening. They're just not listening. The gallery is not packed full. There are not people outside watching this on a big screen. It's pretty full, okay. But this, more than over, okay. This, what we've seen is essentially parties have decided against it. The Lib Dems can't find 51 Lib Dems to decide they would want to run the city. I think that says something about whether the Lib Dems should run the city. And the Tories decide that they would rather try and claw away bits of power. And they don't want to have an all-out elections in the year of a general election. I don't know whether that says more about your faith in Theresa May's government, your own government, or in Amanda Salloway. I'm not sure. But either way, it's not a faith in the system that you're running. This is a massive disappointment. Having sat on the scrutiny committees where we looked at this 5 years ago, and having seen what it's done for other cities in terms of engaging people in politics, having more of a drive, it's a terrible disappointment that instead we're just going to play more petty politics in this city until next time.
Thank you, Councillor Stanton. Councillors, can we just let people speak, please, without other conversations or discussion? Whichever, no, I'm not. Whichever party. Thank you. Right, Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is a very shameful day for the City of Derby. I've heard weak arguments from weak leaderships to weaken this city, and it's a very bad day. The reason it's a bad day is because we've seen that what we need to be is an outward-looking city. We need to be competing with the likes of Nottingham and the likes of Toyota City and the likes of Dusseldorf and those places across the world. And what do they have? They have situations where they have elections once every 4 years or once every 5. And we can see the effects on this city in terms of our financial position. We have the second lowest council tax charge in the East Midlands. And okay, that's quite good in some respects, but in terms of austerity, it means each year we're less £16 million. And it says to me that there are many party leaders in this chamber, and some that aren't here, that realise actually if they were to vote for all-out elections, they wouldn't find 51 candidates. And I think that in itself is shameful. I also think talking about the committee system is missing the point. This is about us being outward-looking, having faith in ourselves and actually standing in front of the electorate and say you can either sack us all or back us all. This is your opportunity to do it. It's a real meaningful election that you can have your say on, and that means parties have got to have manifestos that actually work and actually costed and aren't silly or stupid at talking about things like hospital parking charges or the stuff that the Tories came out with. It actually means if you've got a manifesto there, you could actually win this election and you might just find yourself in charge of this council. And that's what it's about. It's also saying to the business community, we're serious about Derby, and it's also saying that nationally and internationally, we're serious about Derby, making sure we have appropriate governance to take us forward. And that's what it's about. It's not my position or your position. It's about the city of Derby. That's what it's about. This is what we're voting on today. And I've heard weak arguments, rubbish arguments, putting party political advantage before the city of Derby. And we should be ashamed of that. Absolutely ashamed. If you cannot find 51 candidates, if you cannot put the city of Derby before your own self-interest, you shouldn't be here, and you should be thoroughly ashamed of yourself every single time you come here, every time you stand up. And if you vote against it tonight, I hope you go back to the electorate and tell people what you did for Derby today was a very great disservice. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bayliss. Councillor Evans.
Madam Mayor, thank you. In principle, I agree with this. I really do. Bear in mind, everybody, as you're all aware, we don't have a whip. Bill Allen can vote for who they want. And speaking about Allen, I can genuinely say he's got personal issues in London. It's not fair to say this. I do agree with it, and it will save the council money. But I've dragged off a few figures from the election timetable of England which support that. Of 348, I could be a few out here, 232 of them do the one election every 4 years out of 348. That's a large percentage. So there's a lot of councils already doing this. So it must be working. But for myself, anyway, it's the implementation of it in the year 2020. It does coincide with the general election, and it's too big a transient change. The only others that coincide out of those 232 are 5. There's only 5 in local authorities that comply with the 2021. I know it will clash 1 year in the future, but the transient period would be gentler. And that's all I've got to say, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Just Councillor Skelton, if you want
Councillor
to...
Skelton, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I'd like to just start by saying that the number of responses, certainly from residents within the city, to the consultation was disappointing. It doesn't seem that the subject has gripped the public at all. In fact, more people have signed petitions against the Labour Party's plans to slash the number of council-run libraries than took part in this consultation. Some points that have already been raised, I would like to take issue with. That supposedly short-termism in our current system rules and that's it. Certainly when I was a cabinet member for adult social care, I brought in a new strategy to bring extra care progressively to the city, and at the same time as expanding that, reducing the number of our own care homes over about a 10-year period. So I was perfectly happy doing that. We got consent and buy-in from all the people we needed to. There was no great hoo-ha or anything in the public because people had been involved. So that the whole issue of, short-termism, people might not like it, it'll be terrible, never entered my head. Do the job properly and people will be able to see where you're going. Staying on the extra care topic, when the Conservatives ran the county council, They too, along with district councils, some more cooperative than others, pushed through a programme of extra care. Except that the elections then that happened, so almost, 3.5 years ago, Labour went into those elections promising to undo all that they could do of what the Conservatives had just implemented. Fortunately for the people of the county, the Conservatives managed to finish off that particular job before the election, so that that work couldn't be undone. But so there is still this back and forth in a 4-year system as well. So it's not a valid point to make to try and say it's otherwise. Nobody has so far yet said what would be the consequences if we get, as a result of a 4-yearly election, a very difficult no overall control position. You have that for 4 years, whereas at the moment, if we have one, it's there for 1 year or maybe 2 if we've got the fallow year. But at least we have that opportunity to get out of that situation. I think, as well as has also been said, the issue of 2020. We'll have 3 elections on that day: general election, PCC and City Council election. And it has been shown in the past that people do get confused, some people do, about which one to vote for what, and it all becomes quite difficult. But accountability, of course, is very important, as also has been mentioned. And the current system actually does give the voters more power over us. And I'm happy that people do have that power. I think that also there is an issue of, as was brought up by myself at the last council meeting, voting fraud. If somebody successfully commits voting fraud, they only have to do it once in every 4 years. Where at the moment, if they're going to do it, we've had convictions. It has happened in the city. We are actually on the Electoral Commission's a watch list of one of a few councils who have a problem. So until that's sorted out, I will be very cautious. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Skelton.
I'm not aware of any more speakers, so if Councillor Van Wick wants to sum up before the vote.
Are there any more speakers on this?
Move to the vote.
Councillor Van Wick, do you wish to sum up?
Madam Mayor, very, very disappointing. A bit humorous, though. I can see, Councillor Skelton, you've got to have loyal supporters like that. Bloody hell, I didn't understand the word you said there, but never mind. But I'm glad your family's in. But look, this is. I think that Councillor Bailey's contribution was quite telling. You know, this is sad. This is a very sad day for democracy. It's a sad day for Derby. You know, and again, party politics is going to get in the way of giving the public an opportunity to really have the most powerful say in how this city is governed. Giving people an opportunity every 4 years to vote on a real programme of change. Not pie-in-the-sky manifesto, because let's be realistic, what's going to happen now, you're going to go back to the usual politics where they're going to put a manifesto, not costed, no full well, you know, they're not going to assume leadership, but they can make anything. And they've said that. They said, well, we don't have to worry, you know, we can say anything we like in our manifesto. UKIP are not going to support this, that's the indication I've got, so they're playing their games. And the Liberal Democrats, really disappointing, they go on about this committee system, and, you know, Lucy, we've spoken about this. This is completely separate to the electoral system. We can bring in the committee system at any stage. You know, if that's your big thing, we've talked about it before, you know, put that aside, vote on the merits of this. But as your leader said something, I don't know exactly what she said, so it's difficult to kind of comment on it. She said something, which I assume is not to support it. But can I just deal with this issue of businesses? Please go and speak to Peter Richardson, speak to Simon Storey, speak to John Vickers at the club. I think you've misunderstood. The support they're giving to the electoral cycle change is because they've seen the benefits of working with an administration over the long term. They've seen the value in this administration, whether it's about, to be frank with you, whether it was Labour or Conservative, I like to think, whoever was governing the city during that time, we'd hopefully made some of the right decisions. We would have seen it right to support the cricket club with a loan so they could bring in the Women's World Cup cricket, which is going to come next year, which is going to bring a substantial amount of income into the city. I'm proud to say I was involved in that. It was one of the first projects that the Chief Exec and I worked together. There are all sorts of examples, whether it's Rolls-Royce, the aerospace campus, and modernising that. You know, the Rolls-Royce executive is able to pick up the phone and to talk to somebody like myself, talk to the Chief Exec, because that relationship is there. They've never had that before. They've just not had that before. With the constant change of leaders and administrations, they've not been in a position to build up those long-term relationships. And of course, if you look at the Renaissance Board, look at the businesses on the Renaissance Board. You can't just simply say they're businesses. They represent thousands of Derby residents and employees. They know the benefit to their businesses. And these are businesses that pump a huge amount of investment into the city that keep this city moving forward, progressing, putting jobs into the city. So to simply dismiss businesses as the way you've done, please pick up the phone and speak to Trent Barton. Speak to Simon Matheson at Arriva, how we work closely together on trying to tackle transport issues in the city. You know some of these personalities, Lucy. Just simply to flippantly say, well, businesses are concerned because you've read a letter, speak to them. Speak to them the way we have. Madam Mayor, this is disappointing, really is disappointing. Disappointing that they're not going to support it. I don't know what else we can do as an administration. You know, to put forward a proposal that will transform the nature of politics forever, we would have hoped, for the better, it's not going to get the support it needs. I really do hope that the opposition have an opportunity to be answerable, and I know the Derby Telegraph will be particularly disappointing. They've seen the cracks in the democratic process in the city. They've seen the cracks in the things that held the city back. They've been passionate about campaigning for all political parties to make this change. I do hope that the media do try to find some proper answers, not the weak, pathetic responses given. Councillor Holmes, I have to say, again, another example. If Philip Hickson were there, Lisa, I think you would have got some potentially robust responses. I mean, we're going to be left completely in the dark of what they might have been with the appalling arguments that you put in this chamber. But you are at odds with your political colleagues. The Minister, Theresa Coffey, I will be writing to her again, and because she came here for a meeting to talk about air quality, and I said to Pauline Latham was at the same meeting, I said, Minister, she was invited up, by the way, to help us talk in a cross-party way, because air quality is a major issue for the city. We didn't want to make it a political issue. We wanted to talk about the right things, so the Minister kindly came up. I have to say I was very impressed. She pulled a meeting together. I think she'd spoken to some of your members, and I asked the Minister, what's your view on us changing the electoral cycle? She said, and she's quite a bombastic figure, quite frank talker, and I have to say I admire that approach. She said, oh, well, you know, where I'm from, it's made a massive difference since we've changed it to a 4-year electoral cycle, a huge difference. And she leant over the table and said, Pauline, what do you think? And Pauline says, Minister, I agree. I think it will make a massive positive difference to the city of Derby. So this is nothing to do with what's in the interest of the city. You're prepared to not listen to very senior politicians that know the value of a 4-year electoral cycle. This is purely your obsession, your quest for power, just for power's sake. But Councillor Holmes, let me tell you this, once you've got it, you're going to actually have to make decisions. I don't know if you've twigged on that, because you've not had to actually make a decision at all on anything beyond deciding which fantasy you're going to pick for your manifesto. That's easy. It doesn't require any skill, any genius to do that. And can I just say this now? I've spoken to Conservative leaders while I've been on my work, talking to them about this, and they said, you can use us as a reference point. Talk to the Conservative counterpart. Get him to speak to us. You know, the leader of Solihull is an example. They know the value of it. But you know what they said? They said they won't support it because anybody can do opposition. It's easy. That's where it is.
Thank you, Councillor Van Waite.
Recorded vote, please, Madam Mayor.
Recorded vote, okay. Right. Yeah, okay. Right.
Would members please indicate if they are for or against the motion as I read out their name? Councillor Afzal? For. Councillor Anderson? For. Councillor Ashburner?
Against.
Councillor Banwaite? Councillor Barker?
Against.
Councillor Bayliss?
For.
Councillor Bolton? Councillor Kerr? Councillor Carr? Councillor Dinser? Councillor Eldred? Councillor Evans? Councillor Froggatt? Councillor Grimmadell? Councillor Harwood? Councillor Hassel? Councillor Heselgrave? Councillor Alison Holmes? Councillor Matthew Holmes? Councillor Hudson? Councillor Hussain? Councillor Ingle? Councillor Jackson? Councillor Keith? Councillor Jahangir Khan? Councillor Shiraz Khan? Councillor Marshall? Councillor Nater?
Against.
Councillor Nawaz? Councillor Pegg? Councillor Potter? Councillor Poulter? Councillor Raju? Councillor Rawson? Councillor Repton? Councillor Ralston? Councillor Russell? Councillor Sandhu? Councillor Shankar? Councillor Skelton? Councillor Smale? Councillor Stanton? Councillor Turner? Councillor Webb? Councillor West? Councillor Whitby? Councillor Wood? Councillor Wright? And the Mayor, Councillor Winter.
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You need 33.
The motion has failed.
Madam Mayor, just to explain, the motion has been lost. The vote is 2/3 of those in attendance this evening, and that was 33, so the motion is lost.
Thank you. We'll now have a 10-minute break before we start the next meeting to allow the questioners to come down. Thank you.